everyone, and welcome to UFC Connected. I'm your host, Megan O'Leary, and here's what's coming up on today's show. Uncover the origins of British heavyweight contender Tom Aspinall.
I couldn't imagine my life without combat sports. It has been in my life for as long as I can remember.
We flash back to UFC 38, Brawl in the Hall, the promotion's first ever event in the UK.
The event put UK MMA on the map. Without the Brawl in the Hall, it doesn't happen.
And Michael Chandler shares his take on the UFC Lightweight division.
You're seeing the surge of other names who are coming, solidifying themselves in the top of the division. So the future is bright, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
As the son of a jiu-jitsu black belt, England's Tom Aspinall was introduced to combat sports at an early age. After joining the famed Team Calbon as a teen, Aspinall was forged into one of the best heavyweights in Europe, blazing his way through the regional scene before finding a home in the UFC. Tom details his journey from Atherton to the Octagon in this edition of Origins.
England's got a rising contender in the heavyweight division. The new wave, the next generation, is Tom Aspinall.
He just seems like he's born and bred to be in there.
So slick. People say that he moves like a middleweight, and he's got tremendous jiu-jitsu, and he's got knockout power in both of his hands.
A lot of people think we might be looking at a future UFC heavyweight champion.
Kid's real, man. The real deal.
I couldn't imagine my life without combat sports. It has been in my life for as long as I can remember. My dad, he used to work in IT, but he retired from that years ago and then started teaching jiu-jitsu full-time. My dad is a former fighter himself. He's always been into martial arts, and it's always been around. Even on my mum's side, they had fighters, boxers, and even if they weren't fighting professionally, they were all like scrappers and stuff anyway, so it's always been in my life.
Tom started to grapple when he was maybe 6 or 7. When he was about 10 or 11, he started to really enjoy it. And because I was teaching jiu-jitsu, he was a mat rat. You know, he was with me every day. He'd done all the particular sports, jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling. And then I'd met Colin from Carbon, and it just came from there, really.
I first met Tom when he was 14, 15. I think his dad would have come maybe second year I opened and was looking to use a bit of mat space, practice a bit of jiu-jitsu with his friends. So we got talking to him. And then within a couple of weeks, it was like, wouldn't mind learning a bit of jiu-jitsu if I do jump in and do a bit of it. And he says, I'll do you a deal then. I'll teach you a little bit of jiu-jitsu if you coach my son. I was lucky enough to get him so young, so I was able to mold him into what I thought I'd like him to look like. From them early days, for me, it was all about getting him fast, keeping him moving, getting his angle game up, getting him as agile and as quick as I could, and that's how I've trained him. So now I believe he's probably as fast as a welterweight. I'll put him against welterweights in here. You can outspeed them, no problem. You can outgas tank them, no problem. So I think it's worked. I think it's paid dividends.
Time. Beautiful. Yeah, I need it twice as fast though.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I had to sit down with someone, probably when he was 15, and said, what is it you want to do? And he just said straight away, I want to be in the UFC. So I guarantee I'll put you in the UFC if you just keep doing what I'm telling you to do. I think Tom's motivation, maybe in the early days, will have come from being surrounded by people in the UFC. Anyway, I don't know if there's one individual that stood out, I'd say, because at that time we had a lot. When Tom was 14, 15, he'd then already be sparring with someone like Terry Etim, who's in the UFC.
I would be on the mat like starstruck, and I'd just be like a big young kid trying to get involved. I must have been probably about 16, 17 when I even started like landing any kind of punches on these guys and maybe winning the odd round like here and there in sparring, and that's a good feeling.
Tom's one of them who's evolved along the way, going past fighter number 1 right through, and he's been there right from the early days right through to Darren Till. And each day he'd used the guy who's in the UFC as his motivation. Not one day did Tom give up, not one day did Tom say, that's it, I'm not cut out for this, it's too hard. Each day he'd come back, and each day he'd get that little bit better.
Time. Nice round, boys. Perfect. Perfect. We go again.
The way that me, my dad and Colin looked at it when I was fighting amateur was, we'll just take as many hard fights as we can at amateur to get the most experience we can.
Christian Bircher taking on Calvin's Tom Aspinall.
I'd be very surprised if we don't see a relatively quick finish from this position. And that choke looks very tight to me, Dave. There's the tap.
So I think out of 9 fights, I think 7 or 8 of the people I thought were unbeaten. In my 3rd amateur fight, I fought someone 8-0 with 8 knockouts.
Still the UFC Heavyweight Champion, Tom Aspinall!
I really enjoyed the amateur days, actually. I would have had 50 fights if I could. The problem was with my amateur fights is I basically ran out of people to fight. Turning pro. Same as with the amateur thing, like I wanted to have as many fights as I possibly could.
Aspinall in the white and grey, Ruskak in the black and blue.
Yeah, immediately trying to close the distance, but Aspinall easily taking this one to the ground.
Aspinall putting in the work here. Big punches from Tom Aspinall. This is going to be it. The referee takes a close look, and it's all over. Aspinall maybe seeing this as a good chance to test his stand-up against the big man.
Good combinations.
Oh, big shot, and he's out, and it's all over.
In England, there wasn't a heavyweight like him. It was about 2015 where opponent after opponent just pulled out. You know, so there aren't many heavyweights around, and heavyweights pull out.
It was very rough for me with MMA, to be honest. I had a child, and then we found out that we were having twins. I wasn't getting no regular fights, and people were like, what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna provide for your family? I was training all the time. I was struggling to get opponents though, and the fights just weren't coming through, and that was probably the toughest time of my whole career.
So in 2.5 years before Tom would get an opponent, we'd be sitting in venues for an opponent not to turn up. So a lot of people would have thought, okay, fair enough, he's had a good go, he needs to go and earn money, support his family. But he trusted and he believed because we knew where we wanted to go and how we were going to get there.
He was giving up MMA, packing in altogether. And I thought, Tom can make it to the top. So we went through heartfelt, you've got to do this. Eventually, we talked him round and then he came back.
I was aware that the UFC were looking at me anyway. So that's why I signed with Cage Warriors, because I thought they could give me better opponents who I could give me more time in there before going to the UFC.
For the finish, and it's over! Unbelievable!
The same thing happened in Cage Warriors. It's just really hard finding people of that quality to fight.
Cage Warriors were really struggling to get me opponents, and they told me that. And I thought, if Cage Warriors release me, I'm back to square one. So it's either I go to the UFC now, or I'm back to where I was like 2 years ago. So obviously we went for the UFC, and obviously it was the right move, so I'm happy with it.
It's pretty much been the plan since Tom was able to walk that he would get here to the UFC, Dan.
This guy is a devastating individual at this heavyweight division.
It doesn't matter if you're on the UFC or you're on an amateur show. It's the same thing, just fighting another guy who's trying to knock you out.
Jake, you ready? Have fun, gents.
There is Tom Aspinall making his UFC debut. Round number 1. Oh! That's it! Knockout for Tom Aspinall in his debut!
The close people around me and myself, like, we all had a strong belief that this is what I'm going to do and it's going to work. And without that belief, I wouldn't have done it.
I'm glad he's doing what he's doing. I wanted the kids to do something that they like doing. That's the only important thing as a father. I'm glad he's an athlete if he wants to be an athlete.
Nice clinch here.
Beautiful. Yeah, this was a very smart move for Tom to take him down.
There he is. Wow. Double quick again. He goes 2-0 with the UFC.
Oh, he connected. Look at this. Oh, this could be it. This is it. It's done. There it is. Look at that.
It goes right under the chin.
Aspinall's got some fast hands, man. He's really fast.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is it.
It's over.
Still on the range. Wow. What a
Wow.
moment for the budding heavyweight contender.
Wow.
Tom Aspinall is the real deal.
I am motivated on another level. Like, I've got to kick up the arse more than I've ever had before to go and push myself to the absolute limits, because this is my dream and I ain't letting no one take it away from me.
Tom Aspinall.
2022 marks the 20th anniversary of the UFC's first event in the UK. It was 2002 when the Octagon descended in London's iconic Royal Albert Hall. For UFC 38, Brawl in the Hall, an event that would kickstart a new era in the region. MMA historian Nick Peet looks back at the legacy stemming from that one night in London.
It's 2022 and we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of UFC 38, the Brawl in the Hall. When the UFC rocked into the UK in 2002, it was a world away from the sport that we see today. Over in Vegas, of course, the Fertittas had bought the brand and they were 18 months into the redevelopment and things were moving fast. The sport in the UK around this time, listen, it was busy. There was talent there waking up to it. But you were talking about fighters fighting for a couple of £100 at the most, and they were the main eventers. The sport was absolutely in its infancy. UFC had never been to Europe before, despite knowing that there was talent certainly coming out of this region. The Fertittas knew that was a massive opportunity out there, not just with the talent. Passion of the British fans was notorious, and they knew that if they could take an Octagon into central London, that they were bound to capture the attention of those fans, generate an incredible atmosphere. So the UFC knew they had to head into Europe, and they knew that London was the right city. What they needed now was an iconic venue. They got that with the Royal Albert Hall. The Royal Albert Hall dates back to like the early 19th century. This is a venue that is one of the most beautiful, admired, iconic buildings in all of London. This is a place that holds operas and classical music events and charity balls. For mixed martial arts to get in there was kind of unheard of. It was kind of unreal. It felt like a step way too far. So when the UFC announced it, nobody in the UK could believe it was actually true. To move it to the next level, what the sport needed was an injection of attention. That was what the UFC brought to the UK MMA scene, and they needed a good roster of fighters that absolutely stood out and had to be on that card. UFC put together a 7-fight card, and of course, they went all out with the main event. The big rematch that everybody was talking about. Matt Hughes versus Carlos Newton. We all knew what had happened just 7 or 8 months before. Carlos Newton had got Matt Hughes in a submission. He basically out, but then, boom, the power slams came. Newton's out cold. Hughes is awake again, and we've crowned ourselves a new champion. One of the most incredible moments in UFC history. But everybody knew there was question marks about Matt Hughes, so they had to run it back. They brought it to London. Title fight that they knew was going to capture the attention of the fans. But what they really needed to get the fans going was some local talent. James Zikic and Lee Remedios, 2 popular fighters stepping into the Octagon for the very first time. But let's face it, this whole card was based on 2 fighters, Mark Weir and Ian Freeman, the 2 most popular fighters in the sport in the UK at that stage in time. Weir was a Taekwondo black belt. He had a massive following and had a habit of finishing fights early. We'll come back to that. Then, of course, Ian Freeman. At that time, absolutely the poster boy of the sport here in the UK. He was the guy that had already fought in the UFC. He'd been to the Promised Land before. Not only that, he dragged the Promised Land back to England with him.
Feels like a lot of pressure to win, because I can win all the time in America. Nobody knows about it. I lose once in England, everyone thinks I'm a failure.
Man, that's some motivation right there. Freeman may have been the big draw for the local fans, but man, this is the UFC. Nobody gets a soft touch, and absolutely, he got a ferocious one in Frank Mir. Undefeated fighter at the time, and he outmatched Freeman in pretty much every department. Freeman was a big underdog going into that fight. He knew exactly what he was facing.
Anyone gets in front of the machine, I'm going to come through and I'm going to kick your ass, boy.
So the card is absolutely set. They've secured this iconic venue. What the UFC now is a catchy name. And come on, Royal Albert Hall, Brawl in the Hall, this stuff writes itself. Mainstream media, radio, television, newspapers, everybody was talking about the fact that UFC was coming to the UK for the very first time. The event has to deliver.
The world-famous Royal Albert Hall hosts tonight to the most prestigious mixed martial arts competition on the globe as the UFC invades the UK.
When the broadcast starts, boom, the screen comes alive. The Albert Hall 100% delivers. It looks absolutely phenomenal.
UFC has arrived in the UK. Welcome to the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
The real deal had finally arrived. 3,800 fans inside that venue. Up until that very moment, had only seen the UFC on VHS tape. Now, they weren't just watching the UFC, they were part of the UFC. By the time the main card gets going, the atmosphere was incredible. But when it mattered most, things didn't start too well for the Brits. Zikic steps in the octagon to take on unbeaten American Phil Miller. It was a great fight, but it just didn't go Zikic's way. But what the global audience got to see was how passionate the British fans were, the kind of noise they were going to make. Man, more was to come. Next up was Lee Remedios. He was stepping in against Mr. Entertainment himself, the king of the ring walk, Japanese icon Genki Sudo. Imagine this young BJJ guy from England is suddenly thrown into the octagon with a Japanese fighting icon like Genki Sudo. He just didn't know what to do with him. And I think by the time the rear naked choke went in round 2, I think the English fans were just happy that their guy had survived to fight another day.
Genki Sudo wins by submission.
So things aren't going too well for the home fans, but then in steps the big man, the wizard himself. Mark Weir gets in against Eugene Jackson. Now, on paper, this was a tough fight, man. Jackson was a tough wrestler and he knew how to fight. But the Weir show was about to begin. The highlight of Mark Weir's career was just 10 seconds away.
Let's rock and roll! The Wolf and the Wizard meet Jackson in the red trunks, Weir in the black trunks. Oh my, this is a high kick, and it's over! It is over! Mark Weir knocks out Eugene Jackson in what has to be the quickest knockout in UFC history!
Bell went, they came out, touched gloves for a brief second, and then Weir threw a short crescent kick that allowed him to close the distance, and right behind it, Jackson didn't even see it coming. A short, choppy right hand. Boom! He was out cold before his head even bounced off the canvas.
All the years I've been doing martial arts, first time I feel recognised as a sportsman, athlete, and I had to live up to it. That's all I kept thinking to myself, I have to live up to it.
That's one of those moments where he's looking back, he knows this is the pinnacle. In that brief moment, he looks back over a whole lifetime in martial arts, and suddenly everything comes into place. He'd arrived now. He'd achieved all his dreams in that moment. This was bigger than any title fight. This was the UFC in the UK for the very first time, and it certainly meant an awful lot to Mark Weir. But co-main event time now. Let's face it, it's the people's main event, and in steps the machine, Ian Freeman, to take on the rising superstar Frank Mir. I don't think anybody could have guessed what was about to unfold. A completely dominant, masterful performance.
There's a right, he connected. Freeman, another right. He gets ahead, another uppercut to Frank Mir, an undefeated UFC fighter.
There was absolutely nowhere in this fight where Freeman was getting beaten. Frank tried everything. He tried pulling guard, he tried climbing on top, he tried, at one point he had Ian in a heel hook attempt, but Freeman just could not be stopped. He was like a one-man Terminator. He was in there to get rid of Frank Mir.
And there's a heavy forearm shot. Mir is in trouble.
He was done, man. He was shot. Poor Frank was beaten, bloodied, bruised, and John McCarthy was given no option. He waved the fight off, and the place went mental.
McCarthy has stopped the fight. Ian Freeman has defeated Frank Mir.
Probably more iconic than the performance was Ian's celebration once he got hold of that microphone.
Yo, England, I did it!
This was his night. The one he trained his entire life for. Absolutely spectacular performance.
Brace yourselves, because we still had the main event to go. Two of the biggest names in the sport. The rematch was on. Hughes, Newton 2. And it was about to go down inside the Royal Albert Hall. The fight itself was an absolute cracker. But it was Hughes that was absolutely in the ascendancy. By the time he got into round 4, the mounted crucifix, raining in those right hands on Newton's face, it was done. Matt Hughes is the better man. The champion rode off with his belt. So the main event, wow, it was the icing on the cake. But make no mistake, this event was about Mark Weir and Ian Freeman, going from becoming pioneers in UK MMA to becoming absolute legends. The event put UK MMA on the map. It also got mainstream media interested in UK MMA. With that, brought more shows. With that, brought more gyms. With that, brought more competitors. And the sport grew and grew and grew from that moment. Today, we've got contenders across all the weight divisions.
We're looking at a potential champion, 100%.
Paddy the Baddy Pimblett has done it! What a stoppage! Darren Till has taken out a legend.
We've had a UK UFC champion in Michael Bisping. And we've also provided the sport with some of its most iconic characters. So we're here in 2022. It's the 20th anniversary of the Brawl in the Hall, and I'm delighted to say that London has remained one of the most popular destinations for the UFC. Without Mark Weir, without Ian Freeman, without the Brawl in the Hall, it doesn't happen.
Since Jens Pulver was crowned its inaugural champion back in 2001, the UFC Lightweight division has produced some of the most iconic moments in MMA history. Stars like BJ Penn, Anthony Pettis, Conor McGregor, and of course, Khabib Nurmagomedov all contributed to the history of a division that is often considered the deepest in the sport. One recent and welcome addition to the weight class is Michael Chandler, who we locked in for his take on the lightweight division.
Listen to this crowd go nuts. 155 pounds is the most talent-stacked division in MMA today.
Oh! Big knockdown for Michael Chandler!
I mean, just chaos, killer after killer after killer in the talent-rich lightweight division.
The lightweight division and the lighter weight divisions have really come up over the last couple decades. When mixed martial arts first started, it was the big guys, it was the 205ers, it was the heavyweights. The baddest man on the planet was always the heavyweight champion of the world. As the sport continued to progress and as more and more cards happened and as more and more high-level athletes who really dedicated their life to the sport of mixed martial arts came in.
That right there is the greatest lightweight in the history of the sport.
You start to see the lighter weights getting a little bit more shine, a little bit more notoriety, saying, okay, well, maybe this guy is the pound-for-pound best fighter on the entire planet.
Nurmagomedov under the chin, there's the top! Incredible. The standard upon which all lightweights will be judged, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
I think what makes the lightweight division unique is it's somewhat the average size of the average human being. So then when you think about the lightweight division, I think it's kind of that sweet spot in between where you see power, but you also see high pace. All of the different attributes of the human being is at its finest.
Oh my goodness.
They swing with reckless abandon.
Some of the best displays that we've ever seen have happened at lightweight.
Wow! Unbelievable.
Man, when you think about the legends of the lightweight division, you think Jens Pulver, who was the original UFC champion, BJ Penn, who was the champion after that. Those guys were the guys who laid the groundwork. They laid out the brick road. Season 5 of The Ultimate Fighter were the first time that we had the lightweights on The Ultimate Fighter. Jens Pulver, BJ Penn as the coaches. Some of the names inside of that house have become household names inside of the UFC. So to see the lightweight division on display on network television was awesome as we continued to usher into the mainstream that the lighter weights are getting a lot more attention because of the power and the speed, the athleticism, the knockouts, the cardio, all the different attributes that the lightweight division brings to the action inside of the octagon.
And he's got Manus.
But one of the pivotal moments of the lightweight division was whenever Strikeforce and the WEC joined the UFC. We talk about all the names that all of us know.
And now picking him up his weight and he slams into the mat.
I cannot think of a better way to bring down the curtain.
Oh my goodness! Did you see that? He ran up the wall like a ninja.
Champions that were going to come into the UFC and become champion.
There's the armbar. That is a tight armbar, Mike. He taps.
It is all over. Anthony Pettis is the UFC Lightweight Champion of the world.
We talk about the lightweights starting to get more and more respect.
Anthony, you want to do it? Absolutely.
To imagine a world where a lightweight, Anthony Pettis, was on a Wheaties box really solidifies that the lightweight division was growing in notoriety. So I think that was one of the peaks of when the lightweight division was really starting to get a lot of shine.
He is the UFC Lightweight Champion of the world. Trying to choke him out. Can he get it?
It was definitely a pivotal moment in the lightweight division.
He got it. Anthony Pettis remains the UFC Lightweight Champion of the world.
Unbelievable.
So when you talk about lightweights too, you have to talk about the entrance of Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor stormed onto the scene as a featherweight, won the title, and always talked about becoming a two-division champion.
Island, baby, we did it! Yeah!
It was a lofty goal that not a lot of us thought was going to be able to happen.
No fighter in UFC history has ever been champion in two weight divisions at the same time. McGregor looking to make history. Here we go!
When he came in, beat Eddie Alvarez at Madison Square Garden, he almost looked untouchable.
Big shot.
Well, he hurt him bad, Mike.
That, in my mind, was Conor McGregor's best performance that we have ever seen. The most complete, the most dominant.
Oh, man. Oh, he's done. He's done.
It is all over. History has been made. Conor McGregor is the UFC Lightweight Champion.
The sport itself was elevated by Conor McGregor.
Let me raise this now. This is what I dreamed into reality. Oh, that looks good. Oh, that looks good. God bless.
The #1 ranked contender, Conor McGregor, who left to go pursue boxing as the lightweight champion, relinquished the title. Khabib Nurmagomedov assumed the throne in his absence.
Khabib Nurmagomedov looked untouchable in so many different times.
26 have tried.
Oh! He's got it. It's under the neck. Nope, it's on the chin. He tapped.
He looked unbeatable. He had a skill set that people just couldn't figure out.
Khabib is undefeated in his career and has looked absolutely spectacular in each one of his victories.
His takedowns mixed with his pressure, mixed with the damage that he would do, mixed with the cardio and the strength that he possessed. It was something to behold.
He's tapping.
It looks like he tapped.
And he made a promise to his mom, and it was time for him to step away after that last fight.
I promise her it's gonna be my last fight. And if I give my word, I have to follow this.
With a finish of Justin Gaethje, he put an exclamation mark there and solidified himself as one of the greatest lightweights of all time. The future is extremely bright for the lightweight division. This new era of the lightweight division, you've got a couple anchors that have been in the industry for over a decade. You know, myself, I was outside of the UFC watching these guys compete, watching these fights here in the UFC, always wanting to fight these names. Justin Gaethje was a guy that I wanted to fight.
Oh my goodness, look at this fight. Oh, they're in the pocket. Oh my goodness. This may not last.
Dustin Poirier was a guy that I want to fight. Now Conor is a guy that I want to fight. And then you're seeing the surge of other names who are coming out from outside the top 10 into the top 10, solidifying themselves in the top of the division.
Oh, that's it! Islam Makhachev!
Wow.
Oh! Rafael Fiziev! He tapped, and still, Charles Oliveira, down him now, folks!
There's no shortage of great names and great opponents, great opportunities here in the lightweight division, which is, in my opinion, the most entertaining and electrifying division inside of the UFC. So the future is bright, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well, that's all for this episode, but we'll see you next time right here on UFC Connected. Thanks for watching.